never thought I'd be at a loss for words when reviewing a Kevin Smith View Askew picture, which is, for the uninitiated, very different from I don't think a normal Kevin Smith movie, but his other films. He's done other movies, and I think he would admit, and most people who have watched them would admit, that they are not great pictures. And I think there's a very important reason for that. And I believe I've covered this before when talking about Jay and Silent Bob Reboot a year or two ago. I think the reason why none of Kevin Smith's other films have ever clicked with an audience in the way that his View Askew-averse pictures, and most especially the Clerks films, have clicked, is because I don't feel he had anything to say with those pictures. I think he was trying to branch out. He was trying to do some other things, and admirable. I think that's great. But I think the thing about the View Askew-averse is that it's insanely personal to him, and I believe that is why those films, especially to people of my generation, that's why those films are held up as kind of the quintessential 90s independent film. And why those films have meant so much. I love the View Askew-averse. And I feel that, and it's not just the dirty jokes. It's not just the pop culture references, which is what a lot of people tend to attribute the success of his films to. There's a really big heart behind those films. When you watch Clerks, Chasing Amy, Dogma, Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, even Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, Clerks 2, and now Clerks 3, there is something that he wants to say. There is an artist there, and yes, he has the pop culture references, and yes, he has the meta humor, and yes, he has all of this other stuff, but it's the sincerity behind it. And I think that is what has really been his calling card throughout his career, especially when you look at these View Askew movies, is an honest sincerity, a genuine love or a passion or a need to work through whatever it is the characters in the film are working through. It's a very real feeling. His directing is not the snazziest, and in a lot of instances, his actors are not the best. In the original Clerks, they were all non-actors. They were just people he knew. And some of them have gone on to, other careers, and others haven't. But the fact is that what made up for all of that, aside from the dick jokes and the pop culture references, was that we felt that this guy was very honest with us about what he was feeling, what he was thinking, and that is what has always propelled his films forward, and I think put them a cut above a lot of other films of its type, or even big budget films. And I give you this big long introduction because I don't think that Clerks 3 is the most personal of his films, but it is definitely a sobering look at life. That's a stupid sentence. That's a really stupid sentence. What's interesting is that Clerks, as he says, was never meant to be a trilogy. It was never meant to be a sequel. It was a one-off movie. Dante gets shot at the end of the original one. If you watch the original ending. And when they were going to do Clerks 2, and then, you know, I was very skeptical. It was like, no, it's a standalone movie. Leave it alone. What else do you need? But what makes this trilogy so good is the idea that, you know, the very first Clerks was about a day in the life of these guys, and now this trilogy is about a life. It's the most... I can't think of another trilogy or series of films that so accurately depicts the life journey, you know, in that the world doesn't end at the end of the movie when the credits go up. There is more to come. There is more happiness. There is more sadness. There is, you know, getting older, the world changing around you, adapting to meet it, or not being able to adapt to meet it. There are new people who enter your lives. There are people who fall away. And you don't really get a full picture of the life until sadly that life is over. And I feel like now that this series is concluded, I think I won't go into too much here, but they definitely ended. This is an ending. I think we can now look at the three films as a whole and say that this is the story of life, and especially the life of someone of my generation. It's not to say that other generations can't watch it and enjoy it, but it is to say that it is very distinctly a 90s kids. You know, it's their perspective on the life they've led and the world around them. So yeah, I know I'm being very, you know, I'm being very overly critical here. Not so much overly critical, but, you know, digging a little too deep into things. But this film, I'm going to say, I think the best way to put it is it shook me a bit. I kind of knew where the ending was going, but when it finally happened, it really hit you. You know, it really did, especially if you're someone like me who's not so much grown up with these characters, but always felt like these characters were in some way, shape, or form a reflection of your own worldview. And as I mentioned, Kevin Smith did a wonderful job of kind of capturing the worldview of a person of my era. So anyway, that's a long kind of rambling. I feel like I'm still in the introduction. I haven't even talked about the movie itself yet. So the plot here, is that we rejoin our favorite clerks, Dante and Randall, in Leonardo, New Jersey, at the Quick Stop. And one night, Randall suffers a near-fatal heart attack, and, you know, for the first time, kind of looks at his life and realizes he hasn't done much with it, and wants to find that thing that gives his life meaning, that thing that Dante's been searching for, you know, all since he was in his 20s. Randall is now trying to search for, now that he's almost in his 50s. And what he decides is he's gonna make a movie about his life at the Quick Stop. So you already kind of get the joke. It's one of those meta, let's revisit the original in a way that we can kind of comment on it all these years later kind of deals. And, you know, I guess for the rest of it, there's not much to really get into, because it's a Kevin Smith movie. If you've been watching his movies, if you've been a fan of his for any period of time, you know what you're getting into. I mean, it's a Kevin Smith movie. He's mellowed a little bit. Obviously, I was watching some clips from the previous Clerks movies before going away, and man, just like the things that they said and that we said, I won't even try to pretend like I was above it all back in the day. But man, there's no, they don't do any of the homophobic jokes. They comment a little bit on the racist jokes that he's made in previous films. So in a little bit of a way, and I think that some people might view it this way, it feels almost like Kevin Smith's been defanged a little bit, but I don't think that's true. I think Kevin Smith has grown up, as we all have, and kind of said, wow, the things I said and did, back when I was in my 20s in the 90s, boy, shit, we were not enlightened at all. But, the general makeup of the film is very Kevin Smith. A lot of profanity, meta jokes. If you're a person like me who's not only a fan of the original Clerks, but you could say it's one of your favorite movies, and the View Askewverse one of your favorite series of movies, you'll get all the callbacks, and there's callbacks aplenty in this, not just from Clerks 1 and Clerks 2. There's callbacks to the Clerks animated series. You remember that? No, of course you don't, but you should, because it was awesome. There's callbacks to the other films. I kind of wish, this is so stupid, because it's just kind of the way he's done it. People have said it before, that the View Askewverse was almost a blueprint for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's one of the forebears of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in ways that nobody really gets it credit for, in that all of those films are very different in tone and in scope and worldview, and yet they're all part of a singular story. And the reason I bring that up is because this film deals a lot with loss of faith, that question of what do you do when you're faced with your own mortality and all of that good stuff. And Jay and Silent Bob never bring up that they've met God, that they've met the God of this universe. That they never bring that up. And it's like I would think it would be a good thing to bring up in this instance. I can understand why they've never brought it up before, because they do bring up the fact that they've smoked so much pot over the years that they don't remember half the time. They didn't even know Dante's name. But, so the film is solid. It's a lot of fun, and you can enjoy it, and, all the callbacks and all the wonderful cameos, and everybody who was in previous films is back, and you're like, yay, it's that person. But the real meat and potatoes of this, as it is with all Kevin Smith's films, comes down to the core relationship. And again, this is another thing that I don't think a lot of people ever gave Smith's films full credit for, is just how much it deals with friendship. Friendship is always at the core of all of Smith's films. More specifically, male friendship, and not in the dude bro type of way. But, I mean, it's said as a joke, and albeit a very dated and not very PC joke, but there's a reason Jay refers to Silent Bob as his hetero life mate. Because that's what his films are about. And Dante and Randall have always been at the emotional center of the Clerks story, but also of the View Askewverse as a whole. Dante and Randall have kind of been the blueprint for, Banky and Holden, Loki and Bartleby, even Jay and Silent Bob to a certain extent. So, of course, when this film is really hitting hard is when it's dealing with those two friends dealing with the changes of life. And, Randall is facing mortality, his mortality. Dante is facing, is still dwelling in past issues of mortality. He's mourning loss and finding it very difficult to move on. And what is at the core of this film is the prospect of losing the one person that has always been there. And that's I can only speak for myself, and I won't go into details, but that's an issue I know about. And that feeling of, what do I do what does Randall do without Dante? What does Dante do without Randall? What does Pinky do without the brain? And just how much those long-term friendships have really defined your life, and how much you sometimes realize you've been a bigger player in someone's life than maybe they anticipated. And it's when the film gets into that it really becomes very poignant, and again, for people of my age who were getting to that point in life where people start to fall away, and you start kind of realizing this is now going to be the new normal, and it poses the question and the response very, very beautifully, and in typical Kevin Smith fashion, that things will go on, and also the idea that you're in control of your destiny. That's also an underline of the Clerks series, that is very explicit in the first one, and becomes more so as you kind of look at the authors, that you are in control of the life you live, and you are in control of how you deal with the life you live, and how you cope with the life you live, how you celebrate the life you live. And it's again, and maybe it's just I have always felt a real kinship with the work of Kevin Smith. He was very influential on me as a playwright and as a director early on. It was one of those films, his View Askew films, particularly Clerks and Dogma, are some of those first movies I remember from college that I saw and felt this was made for me. This was made with my sensibilities in mind, and it's always just been very odd how much the connection I've had with the Kevin Smith filmography. I remember when Clerks 2 came out, I was on the verge of a big life change, and that's the whole point of Clerks 2, is big life changes, and doing things for living your life for you, and all of that. And it was very poignant, and now it's coming again at a specific time in life, and it's like, wow, okay, that's Kevin Smith and the Muppets are always there when I need them. So I don't know if this film is just hitting me particularly hard because I've always felt a certain connection with his work and with his films, but I don't even know how to end that thought. I don't feel like this has been a great review of the movie. I feel like it's more of a retrospective on Clerks and the View Askewverse, because that's what this film is. Because reviewing this movie is kind of difficult because it's Clerks 3. And Clerks 3 is not just Clerks 3, it's View Askew number, 10? Three Clerks films, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma, 2 Jay and Silent Bob films. So, 8. This is View Askew 8, basically. So if you have not already been on board with this all this time, then it's not going to mean much to you. If you are a Smith fan, then it's going to mean a lot to you. So I feel like this film is a career statement, and it's been reviewed as such. Long story short, Clerks 3 was everything I thought it was going to be. I think that some of the more emotional moments could have been handled a little bit more emotionally, but Smith's always been a very on the surface kind of director. more intimate moments and serious moments have never been a huge thing in his wheelhouse. So I feel some of his more dramatic scenes, particularly towards the end, not like the character arguments, but like the scenes that are more silent, for Silent Bob, really. I don't feel those were directed as well. I don't feel like visually they packed the punch that they could have. But he's also smart enough to know that the emotional punch is going to come from the audience's connection to these characters that we've loved for so long. So yeah, I feel like there are certain parts where Smith's, weaknesses as a director, or limitations as a director, I should say, are a bit obvious, but it doesn't matter to a fan because it just doesn't matter. So I guess it kind of canceled itself out. But there were a couple moments I might have done differently. But when you look at it as a whole, I think this is a worthy addition to the Clerks canon. And I would have to say, unless something happens, it would be great. I seriously doubt that it's going to happen. But unless somehow Smith can wrangle the rights to Dogma back from that pig that used to run Miramax, I don't think we're ever going to get a Dogma Part 2 like he's always wanted to do. So this may in fact be, at long last, which they said it was going to be with Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, the final View Askew universe picture. And if that's the case, I think it's a strong one to go out on. It's a beautiful, it's more than a career retrospective, it's a life retrospective and a love letter to the people and the events and the moments that make our lives what they are, even if at the time we don't think that they're very special, or they may be more annoying or frustrating or just downright mundane, but it's those moments that make life, and that they are beautiful in their own way. He even says that he wanted to make his own version of Cinema Paradiso, and I think to a certain extent he did. So there you have it. Again, I don't feel this was the best review I've ever done, but if you know, then you know. If you don't, then you don't. And you're not going to be picking up. It's like going to see the last Harry Potter movie without seeing any of the other ones. Why are you going to the very last one? So anyway, wrapping up. So final grade for Clerks 3. I'm going to go an A- on this one. And a lot of that is coming from just being a diehard and long-term fan of this man's work and the franchise as a whole. I think if I looked at it objectively, the grade would probably be closer to a B+, or maybe a solid B. But for me, definitely going an A- on this one. This one hit hard. You laughed, you cried, and it gave you a lot to think about in terms of your own life. So if you're a long-term Smith fan, go check it out. If you've never seen one of his movies, they're all available, well, except Dogma, really, which is sad. But you can find them. Go check them out and become a fan. All right, so that is it for me tonight. Yes, I was a rebel. I went to a movie on a school night. Ooh. So thank you for coming along. Thanks for joining me. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.